Before we dive into today's incredible story, we want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Your answers make this community even more exciting. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because tomorrow at the same time, we'll bring you another jaw-dropping story that you won't want to miss. Trust us, it's one you'll be talking about for days. So drop your location in the comments, subscribe, and let's get started. She pepper sprayed a royal guard. His reaction left everyone stunned. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the bustling streets of London as Lisa Reynolds strutted through the crowd near Buckingham Palace. Her designer handbag swung from her arm with every step, her sharp heels clicking against the pavement like a rhythmic countdown to confrontation. At 42 years old, Lisa had built a career on power moves and boardroom battles. She wasn't just another tourist. She was someone who expected the world to bend to her will. And today, that expectation would be tested in a way she never imagined. As she approached the gates of Buckingham Palace, Lisa's lips curled in mild irritation. The sheer number of tourists annoyed her. People standing in clusters, blocking her way, fumbling with cameras, and snapping pictures like they were witnessing history itself. With a sigh, she shouldered past a young couple, barely acknowledging their presence. "Excuse me," she muttered, not bothering to check if they even heard her. She had places to be, and standing around in this heat was not one of them. Then, her eyes locked onto the royal guard, standing at attention near the palace entrance. His scarlet tunic gleamed in the sunlight, the brass buttons polished to perfection, reflecting the world around him. His tall bearskin hat added an air of timeless authority, his stance rigid, unwavering. Lisa narrowed her eyes. There was something about his stillness, his refusal to acknowledge the chaos around him, that irritated her in a way she couldn't quite explain. "Ridiculous," she scoffed under her breath, adjusting the cuffs of her white linen blazer. "They expect us to stand around in this heat just to watch a man in a costume?" But no one responded. The people around her were too engrossed in their own excitement, snapping photos, whispering in awe. Lisa glanced back at the guard, expecting at least a flicker of recognition, a small reaction to her presence. But there was nothing. His gaze remained fixed on some distant point beyond the crowd, his discipline unshaken. Her jaw tightened. It wasn't just his silence that bothered her. It was the fact that for the first time in a long time, someone wasn't giving her attention. She took a step closer, tilting her head as if inspecting a flawed display in a shop window. The guard, however, remained motionless. Lisa smirked. "Well," she muttered, straightening her shoulders. "Let's see about this." Lisa took another step forward, her heels clicking sharply against the stone pavement. The crowd around her buzzed with excitement, but she barely noticed. Her focus was locked onto the royal guard, his unshakable stance fueling the irritation bubbling inside her. She had spent years commanding attention in boardrooms, shutting down executives twice her size, with nothing more than a sharp glare and a well-placed remark. Yet here stood this man, silent, unflinching, completely ignoring her. It was unacceptable. "Excuse me," Lisa called, her voice carrying the practiced authority of someone used to being obeyed. No response. The guard remained still, his eyes focused straight ahead. A flicker of disbelief crossed her face. He had to have heard her. She stepped even closer, placing herself directly in his line of sight. The tourists around her exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the shift in energy. Parents nudged their children back, instinctively aware that something was about to happen. "I said, 'Excuse me,'" she repeated, her voice now edged with impatience. The guard didn't even blink. Lisa let out a breathy laugh, shaking her head. "Oh, I see how it is. You think you're above acknowledging people, huh?" She crossed her arms, her manicured nails tapping against her designer blazer. "Well, let me tell you something. I know exactly how men like you operate." The crowd was fully watching now, murmurs rippling through the tourists like distant thunder. A young couple whispered to each other, cameras momentarily lowered. A group of students nudged each other, eyes darting between Lisa and the guard like they were waiting for the inevitable explosion. Lisa's voice rose another notch, loud enough to demand attention. "This is exactly what's wrong with men in uniform. You think that costume gives you the right to intimidate people?" she scoffed, shaking her head. I work in customer relations, you know? I deal with proper conduct, harassment policies, respect. And right now, you're failing in all three. Still, nothing. Lisa's frustration curled into something darker. Her fingers tightened around the leather strap of her purse as she inched even closer, her perfume mixing with the heat of the afternoon sun. The tourists around her had started backing away, but Lisa was just getting started. If he wanted to play this game, she would make sure he lost. Lisa could feel the heat rising, not just from the afternoon sun, but from the boiling frustration inside her. The way the royal guard stood there, silent, unmoved, as if she didn't even exist, was infuriating. No one ignored Lisa Reynolds. She had broken down corporate executives with a single email, had turned entire meetings in her favor with a sharp remark. And yet, here was this man, standing like a statue, refusing to acknowledge her. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Fine. If he wanted to play it that way, she'd make sure he had no choice but to respond. With a sharp movement, Lisa yanked her phone from her purse and held it up like a weapon, the camera aimed directly at the guard's face. All right, let's see what your superiors have to say about this, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I bet they'd love to know how their guards treat women who just want a little respect. The tourists nearby shifted uncomfortably, some stepping further back while others clutched their phones, recording the scene unfolding before them. A father whispered something to his young daughter before leading her away. Still, the guard didn't move. His eyes remained locked straight ahead, his discipline unshaken. Lisa scoffed, shaking her head. Oh, you think you're untouchable, huh? Her grip tightened around her phone. Let me tell you something. I've had men fired for less than this. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A military veteran, standing a few feet away, narrowed his eyes, watching closely. Lisa took a step closer, her heels clicking like gunfire against the stone pavement. Last chance, she hissed. Either acknowledge what you did or things are about to get very unpleasant for you. Silence. Lisa's hands curled into fists. Her entire life, people had jumped to fix things when she got upset. But this guard, he was treating her like she didn't matter, like she was nothing. Her heart pounded. She wasn't going to let this stand. Her fingers dug into her purse, searching through the expensive leather until they found something cold metallic. Pepper spray. A slow, dangerous smirk curled across Lisa's lips as she wrapped her fingers around the canister. Let's see how well he ignores me after this. Lisa's pulse pounded in her ears as she tightened her grip around the small metal canister inside her purse. The weight of it felt solid, reassuring. A last resort, a final move to force this guard to react. She wasn't some weak, helpless woman, and she refused to be dismissed like one. Her fingers found the nozzle, her thumb resting over the trigger. One press, and this so-called soldier would be blinded, coughing, begging for relief. Then, he'd have no choice but to acknowledge her. A slow smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. Let's see you ignore me now. With one sharp movement, Lisa yanked the canister from her purse, her eyes locked onto the guard's face. The tourists around her gasped in shock. A few stumbled backward, while others instinctively shielded their children. The murmur of the crowd shifted, fear creeping in. A military veteran nearby, his jacket adorned with campaign medals, stepped forward slightly, his trained eyes locking onto Lisa's hand. He knew exactly what was about to happen. But Lisa didn't notice. Her world had narrowed to one simple goal: force this man to break. Last warning, she hissed, voice low, controlled. Either acknowledge what you did and apologize, or I'll show you exactly how a modern woman deals with harassment. Still, the guard didn't move. His stance remained perfect, his eyes fixed straight ahead, as if she wasn't even there. Lisa's patience snapped. With a sharp inhale, she pressed the trigger. A hissing spray of burning mist exploded forward, catching the sunlight as it shot straight toward the guard's face. Gasps erupted from the crowd. A child started crying. A mother pulled her son away, and phones flew up, capturing the moment. Lisa expected panic. She expected him to cough, stumble, claw at his eyes. Instead, the guard didn't even blink. The pepper spray streamed down his face, the chemical burn unmistakable. And yet, he remained still. His gaze didn't waver, his muscles didn't flinch. The spray rolled down his scarlet tunic, but it might as well have been rainwater. Lisa's smirk vanished. The pepper spray canister slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the pavement. Her heart thundered in her chest. That's impossible. Lisa staggered backward, her breath catching in her throat. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He should have been on the ground by now, coughing, gasping, blinded by pain. But instead, the royal guard stood tall, unshaken, his expression unreadable. The crowd was frozen in stunned silence. Even the ever-present hum of London's traffic seemed to fade, as if the entire world had hit pause, waiting to see what would happen next. The pepper spray dripped down his face, tracing slow, burning lines across his scarlet tunic. But the man himself? He didn't even acknowledge it. Lisa's mouth went dry. Her entire life, she had wielded power with her words, with her complaints, with the weight of her influence. But in this moment, standing before a man she couldn't intimidate, she felt something she hadn't in a long, long time. A firm voice cut through the silence. You just assaulted a member of Her Majesty's Armed Forces. Lisa spun around, her heart slamming against her ribs. The military veteran, the man who had been watching everything, stepped forward, his face lined with the weight of experience. His medals gleamed in the afternoon sun, each one a silent testament to battles fought, sacrifices made. His sharp eyes locked onto hers. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Lisa opened her mouth, but no words came out. The veteran turned to the guard, his gravelly voice softer now, filled with something close to respect. Son, let me help you. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a water bottle and a handkerchief, and gently began to rinse the guard's face. The guard allowed it, but never once broke his stance. The veteran shook his head, his expression filled with admiration. I've seen my share of CS gas in training, but this... He let out a low breath. This is the kind of discipline they write about in training manuals. Lisa's knees felt weak. The weight of what she had done came crashing down all at once. She had spent years believing she was untouchable, that she could bend the world to her will with enough force, enough threats, enough outrage. But standing there, exposed, powerless, shaking, she finally understood. Real power isn't about control. It's about discipline. And she had just lost. The distant wail of police sirens cut through the air. The crowd slowly began to shift, whispers spreading. Phones were still recording. This moment, her humiliation, her downfall, would live forever. The guard never looked at her. He didn't need to. What would you have done in this situation? Do you think you could have remained as composed as the Royal Guard, standing firm in the face of such an outrageous attack? Or would your instincts have taken over? This moment wasn't just about one person losing control. It was a powerful lesson about discipline, respect, and the true meaning of strength. The guard didn't need to retaliate. His unwavering stance alone proved who truly held power. Now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed someone let their entitlement go too far? How do you think this situation should have been handled? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story left you speechless, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell. Because tomorrow, at the same time, we have another incredible story that you won't want to miss. Also, let us know where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far our stories reach across the world. Share your location in the comments, and let's keep this conversation going.